Welcome back, everybody. Today we are going to be taking a look at a Glaceon deck from the 2008 format. Now, to give a little bit of background on the title, it's not completely a clickbait title, but basically Alex Presario and I like to both play some games on TCG1. Occasionally we'll play some games we're both on later on at night, and we play a couple of 2008 games where I'm playing this Glaceon deck against him, and I think I'm doing okay, but essentially I end up winning about 3 games in a row, and Alex sends me like a whole chat log of how insanely lucky I get. You realize you shouldn't be getting this lucky. You had at least 10 game-winning coin flips, and you hit them all, or game-losing coin flips, and you absolutely hit them all. And he's just going off on me on this. So I'm hoping he doesn't get too pissed at me for posting this, but I think we're just, we're just old friends, and it was just kind of a couple of funny moments, especially, and I know Glaceon's a little bit of a rough spot for Alex because in 2008 he was, I believe, 14-0. He went undefeated through the grinders, undefeated through Worlds to the top 32, and then he ends up losing to Issa playing this Glaceon deck. So the Glaceon's a little bit of a rough spot for him, but Alex is probably one of the absolute best players that ever played the game. If not, he's definitely in the top 5. So don't tell him I said that, though. But starting off here, we're just going to take a quick look. This is going to be Issa's list. I was not a huge fan of a lot of the card choices he made with it. He ended up making the top 8 in Worlds 2008, so I can't hate on it too much. Obviously, with my list, I took a lot of innovation from this. I just switched some things around that I liked a little bit more. Now, the one thing I will say is I'm probably not as heavily teched for Gardevoir as I should be. I haven't tested the Jirachi as much as I probably should have, and stuff like the Island Hermits and things, but this is the list that I went with. So starting off here, we went with 4 copies of Absol. This card's absolutely insane in the 2008 format. It's your ideal opener. Decks are usually about half trainers, so you got a pretty good shot at hitting something, hitting a trainer at the start of the game, and then discarding another card. Ideally, you want to use Baleful Wind the first couple of turns of the game. Just rip your opponent's hand, and then once you get rid of your opponent's hand, you're going to transition into a Glaceon strategy. Then you've got 3 EVs. Since we're playing only 2 Glaceon level X, we only need to run 3 of the EVs. We're not playing a full Evolutions package like we saw in other decks, or like the Leafeon Glaceon deck we covered earlier on the channel. 2 copies of Glaceon. Now, Glaceon it's okay. Snowcloak is solid, 30 damage, flip coin if heads can't be hurt next turn. And then Speed Slide can also be solid in the right situations where you're going to be able to Speed Slide to get through effects like Bronzong's -20 or opposing Snowcloaks, things like that. So there's going to be uses where that Speed Slide is very strong. The weakness to metal, there's very little metal in this format that you need to worry about. So all in all, this is going to be incredibly strong. And then the reason we play the deck is obviously going to be the Glaceon level X, shutting off your opponent's, as long as Glaceon level X is your active Pokemon, your opponent can't use any Poke Powers. This is incredibly strong because it's a one-sided trainer lock, which means that you can still use your powers, but your opponent can't use theirs. Now, the real strength of the deck, in my opinion, is that it's very hard to get out of this. Now, for example, if you're talking about a deck like Honchkrow, which operates very similarly, except you play Honchkrow over Glaceon. In the Honchkrow deck, if your opponent ever hits a Windstorm or a Warp Point, typically they're able to get out of the lock, and then they're able to Cosmic Power, and they're able to get a decent-sized hand again. Now, with this, they have to have a Warp Point and a Windstorm, because they can't. Windstorm doesn't shut off Chilling Breath, and Warp Point, usually you're going to leave like an Absol with a Cessation Crystal on the bench, so if they Warp Point, you just bring up Absol. Now, at this point, you got to remember you've already completely stripped their hand, so they're going to be ideally just kind of top decking here and there. It's going to be very hard for them to pair those 2 cards together. I went with one Baltoy, one Claydol. There's still going to be a lot of the game that we are going to be under Cessation Crystal, so I didn't want to go with a heavier Claydol line. Just that thin 1-1 line works fine. And then I like Unknown Q in a lot of different Absol decks because opening Absol is so incredibly strong. And if we do end up opening something else, like let's say that Eevee or Baltoy, along with a Roseanne's Research, or even a Celio's Network, if we have an energy in hand, we can grab that Unknown Q, retreat back to an Absol, and then use Baleful Wind from there. So, like, let's say we open Eevee, we can Roseanne's, grab Unknown Q, Absol, attach ideally an energy from our hand to Absol, Unknown Q the Eevee, and then retreat back to Absol, and we get that turn 1 Baleful Wind off. The difference between getting a turn 1 Baleful Wind and a turn 2 Baleful Wind can be really, really big, so that's why I like the Unknown Q in the deck. 4 copies of Celio's Network, just searches anything out. Any of our Pokemon out. Team Galactic's Mars. At first, I was not really a big fan of this card because draw 2 is pretty weak. But what you're really playing it for is that bottoming effect. So essentially with Absol, ideally, between Absol and Mars, you're going to be stripping at least 3 different cards out of your opponent's hand in a single turn. And that can be absolutely devastating. 4 copies of Castaway. You want to be able to find those Cessation Crystals early. It's also really good to be able to search your deck for a basic energy card and then a supporter. So it's just a really, really strong utility card. 3 Roseanne's. Roseanne's, only playing 3 copies may seem a little unusual. A lot of decks in the 2008 format prefer to play 4. The reason we opt for 3 is we've got 4 Call Energy, and then we've got 4 Castaway. So we've got Castaway to help us search out energy, and Call Energy is going to help us search out those basics. So the Roseanne's can be a little redundant in higher numbers, but I don't hate playing 4 copies in the deck. 2 Wagers. I've tried 1, and generally there is going to be times where you want to, if you can't control your opponent's hand at the start of the game, you're going to want to wager, or if they are able to get out of it and get a decent hand size, let's say with like a Chatot or something like that, you're going to want to be able to find those wagers. 1 copies of Steven's Advice. I just like 1 copies of Stevens in general. I think it's just very strong. Be able to, it's another draw card, and it can usually net you quite a few cards. Generally speaking, against any sort of Absol deck, players are going to be very quick. When their hand size gets low, if they draw a basic, they're typically going to want to bench it so it doesn't get discarded. So something like Steven's Advice can usually net you a decent number of cards. 4 ER2, it's on a coin flip, but discarding energy in the strategy is so incredibly strong. When your opponent is struggling to really get anything put together or anything going, being able to just discard an energy, especially if they're struggling to find them, can be just game-breaking. 3 copies of Night Maintenance. Now, this may seem high, but generally what I found playing the deck, and the 3rd copy of Night Maintenance is actually a pretty new addition for me, is this lets me send back 3 full Glaceon lines, and then I can use the last one to send 3 energy back. Typically, towards the end of the game, my energy count is getting a little bit low, and I like having just that little bit extra level of, I guess, support there to be able to send them back in. 4 copies of Cessation Crystal. We want to be able to get Cessation Crystal. We really want to be able to get that turn 1 with that Absol there. There's going to be a lot of situations where you're going to need a Cessation against on a Glaceon or something as well. Now, I also will say it's nice to bait those Windstorms because Chilling Breath does not rely on Cessation Crystal. Losing your Cessation Crystal is not as harmful in this matchup as it is in other ones. So sometimes if you can bait a very early Windstorm, that'll help you lock a Crystal Beach later on in the game. 1 copy of String Charm. Generally, the 5th tool is nice just to have something to search off of that 3rd or 4th Castaway. Because generally at that point you're running out of stuff to search. You're running out of tools to search for, so having that extra tool is nice. I will say there's been some situations where having that extra 10 damage can be huge, but I also think this is a card that could maybe be replaced with something else. I don't know. I'm not really set either way on this one quite yet. 4 copies of Crystal Beach. Some people swear by 3. 3 works at Honchkrow because you can search it out of the discard pile if you need it. This deck does not have a way to search it out, and against a lot of the bigger decks in the format, like Gardevoir Glade or even like Empoleon, you're going to want to make sure that you are locking this beach in play. If you have a Crystal Beach locked in play and your opponent is basically top decking, like if they're playing Gardevoir or something, they're going to really struggle to get any sort of attack off against you. 4 call energy, 8 water energy. 12 energy means we pretty consistently will be able to hit one in the opening hand, and we've got Castaway and Roseanne's just to keep that chain going. So I think 8 plays very well in the deck, especially when we have that third copy of Night Maintenance to send stuff back. Now, why play Glaceon? And that's probably it's a solid question. It looks cool. You get to flip coins. Flipping coins is fun. But in all honesty, is it better than the Honchkrow deck? And I'm going to say probably not. It does things differently. Both Glaceon and Honchkrow, you have a very hard time coming back if you're playing from behind. I think the Glaceon wins harder in that situation, though, if you're ahead, because it's very hard for them to ever get out of Chilling Breath. Because of the 2-card combo it takes. Glaceon also hits a little bit harder than Honchkrow, but it's not actively doing anything. So outside of the body to shut off your opponent's powers, it's not actually doing anything to control the opponent's hand. So I'm going to say Glaceon does a better job of controlling powers than Honchkrow does, but Honchkrow does a much better job of trying to stay on top of the opponent's hand. So I guess I think there's pros and cons to both. Glaceon obviously does a lot better against some like the Magmortar decks that are out there and things like that. And I will say that's one of the nice uses of Strength Charm is Avalanche with a Strength Charm will knock out a Magmortar. But the decks operate very similarly, but I would say that is the big difference between the two of them. Give them both a try, see what you think and what your preferences are. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to catch you in the next one.